Another reason for desk rejection is the research topic and research title. Sometimes the title you use is too narrow and you provide too much information. Here, let me give you an example. See this one. Service quality and previous experience as a moderator in determining tourist satisfaction with rural tourism destinations in the west area of Colombo district, Sri Lanka, blah, blah, blah. Too much information, right? The title of your paper, the way we choose the title is different from the title of a thesis or PhD thesis or master thesis. How to choose a good title? Follow past papers title. I mean, see, for example, you want to submit to a journal, to let's say Asia Pacific Journal of Business Administration. Have a look at the papers and see their titles, and then revise your title following their approach. In my journal, we don't want too much information in the title, and it should not be, the topic and title should not show that the study is too, you should not narrow it down too much, right? And at the same time, it should not be very broad. Yesterday, I received a paper. There were just 3 words in the title. I had no idea what this paper is about. For example, here, if the title is service quality, okay, so what? Service quality what, right? You need to provide more information, not just saying service quality. And the issue is, sometimes the research topic isn't of great enough significance. It means, there are already many papers on corporate governance and firm performance, capital structure of publicly listed companies in any country, or let's say service quality and customer satisfaction. Okay, if you want to do one more study, you should have a very strong justification. And unfortunately, based on what I have seen, in most cases, they just mention that there is no previous study, let's say here, in the west area of Colombo district, Sri Lanka. It means replication. Can we replicate past studies? This is the question. You can replicate, but because especially in social sciences, yes, we can replicate, but you need a good justification, right? For example, there are so many studies on the relationship between A and B, and now, based on what I have seen so far, actually this is one of the justifications, the most commonly justifications in papers we receive from East Asia. They mention, or even other countries, even Middle East, or they mention there are already many studies in developed countries. Now we need to do one study in developing countries, right? Or there are many studies in everywhere, but now we need to do one more study in let's say Sri Lanka, or in the west area of Colombo district in Sri Lanka. So why do we need to do so? Why do you need to do 5 years or 3 years of your life? Let's say it's a PhD work, 3 years of your life, and do study which already has been conducted in many countries, not in Colombo district. Okay, if you want to do so, you need to justify, you need to explain what makes this area, this context different from other contexts. Otherwise, we can just read the results of past studies in other contexts and answer our research questions in this context as well. So if you believe this context is different from other contexts, and if you believe you may get different results, then yes, you can do one more study, right? But you need to justify. You need to justify why we need to do another study in this context. So you cannot just say because, let's say if it's about Sri Lanka or Indonesia, okay, let's say Indonesia, yeah, it is a very beautiful, because it's a very beautiful country, we have very beautiful sky, jungles, or blah, blah, blah. No. Of course, Indonesia is different from other countries, but you need to explain from the lens of your study. If it's about corporate governance, you need to explain what makes Indonesia different from other countries from the lens of corporate governance, right? It's not about, yeah, GDP of this country is different, or maybe, people's language is different, the culture, how this context is different from the lens of your study. Then you can justify. So if just mentioning that no study has been conducted in this country or this area, no, not a good justification. So Sometimes the topic isn't of great enough, so you need to show that you have some contribution. And when we say contribution, we usually mean practical contribution and theoretical contribution. Some journals, their focus is more on practical contribution, like Harvard Business Review. Some journals, they accept more theoretical papers that have theoretical contribution. They accept pure research or basic research mostly. But in the field of business and in my journal, we expect both to be addressed, practical and theoretical contribution. So practical contribution means you need to explain how the results of this study may help policymakers or companies or society, people, how we can improve quality of life, people, life of people. So this is about the real world problems, how we can solve the current real world problems. This is more about practical contribution. And in most cases, I have seen that many studies, they address it well. But another part is theoretical contribution. Again, just conducting another study because it has not been conducted in this context is not a good justification, strong justification for theoretical contribution. You should explain how your study adds value to the current body of knowledge, what we don't know about these phenomena, right? And here I have summarized the most common theoretical contributions in papers. They are not limited to these three, but these are the most common theoretical contributions in quantitative studies. So if, for example, this is the original theory, and the original theory already has been tested and assume that it's the relationship between some variables, as you can see, I named them X, Y, Z. So now, how you can justify theoretical contribution when you have such a model or supported by this theory, developed by this theory? One is confirmation or replication that we just discussed. So you would test the same model in different contexts to test whether a theory is valid in other contexts. So we test or confirm a theory in other contexts. I already explained this part to you. So you need a valid, strong justification from the lens of your study. So again, don't say because there is no study in my area. Don't say only. So you need to clearly explain why. Anyway, so another theoretical contribution can be further explanation. Means we already know the relationship between X, Y, and Z. Now we want to know more about it. In other words, to test why or how a relationship exists. Why there is a relationship between X and Y, or Y or Z, or how this relationship exists. So in this case, you may add a mediator or moderator or both of them or several of them. So in this case, for example, a mediation. Mediation explains the relationship between Y and Z. Y and Z. And N explains, so we explain how Y explains Z. This is a mediator. And moderator, they explain under which condition or when such relationship exists. Then extension or integration, to add to an existing theory or model or to integrate theories and models. This means that there is already a theory and relationships tested. Now you want to integrate 2 theories, 3 theories, or you want to extend past theories. So you already have a theory and a model, you just want to extend it by adding more variables or theories to the model. So it will be something like this. So these are the 3 most common theoretical contributions. Of course, it's not limited to these 3, but again, these are the most common methods. Another one, research objectives and hypotheses. So you need to clearly state your research objectives and hypotheses if it's a quantitative study, if it's a quantitative hypothesis. But for quant and qual mixed, whatever, research objectives must be stated clearly in your paper. Here is one of my papers, and you can see here where you should state your objectives. The last part of your introduction section. So as the editor, when I screen the paper, when I don't see the research objectives in the last paragraph of the, let's say, introduction section, then I may consider this as one of the reasons for rejection. How to state the research objectives? you follow the standard format of stating research objectives. You see, to fill the identified gaps in the literature, the current study aims to, you start with to, and then investigate, examine, study, explore, whatever. So this study aims to investigate, blah, 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 the gender gap in the mechanism that translates family socialization, blah, 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 and also to examine the role of financial information seeking behavior and blah, blah, blah. So there are two objectives here, you see, and both of them start with to, 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 and the verb, to investigate, and here to examine. It should be like this. And now, what about literature review? For literature review, one of the reasons that papers get rejected by Desk is they don't cite recently published papers. I have rejected many papers because they have not cited any paper published in the, let's say, past 5 years. So what happened in the past 5 years? In these cases, I assume that this paper was written 5 years ago and the person has not updated it, right? So make sure you have cited relevant papers published recently, or sometimes there are too many outdated citations. Too many citations from 1970, 1960, 1990, 2000. Yeah, I understand there are some seminal works, you need to cite them, but too many citations may indicate that, okay, the idea is not something new. Sometimes hypotheses are not clearly stated. If it's a quantitative study in the literature section, you need to state them clearly. H1, there is a relationship between blah, blah, blah. H2, yeah. So it must be clearly stated. And sometimes in hypothetical deductive studies, you have not mentioned about the theory, underpinning theory. So what theory you use to develop this model needs to be clearly discussed. And citing papers in low quality journals or non-index journals, it may be problematic, right? I personally, when I want to write a paper, I just use papers published in Scopus, Web of Science, means SSCI, ESCI, and ABDC, ABS in business, yeah, ABDC in business, PubMed, yeah. So if you cite too many papers, many papers, or the idea is based on the papers not publishing good journals, this also may be problematic. And just a tip, let me share something with you. Cite some of the papers published in the journal that you target. So if you want to submit the paper to Journal of Tourism Management, cite some of their papers. Why? Because it shows that, okay, perhaps this paper is in line with what you are publishing. And papers may be rejected because of their methodology or some issues in their methodology. Sometimes in quantitative studies, the sample size is too small, right? I understand that you can use, let's say, some methods that do not need large sample size. But at the end, if it's a quantitative study, we want to generalize the findings. So you need to have enough number of samples. So if the paper, you need to check, you need to use proper methods to compute your sample size, and you need to check past studies to see to check their sample sizes. If yours is too small compared with them, or the method shows that the method you used to compute the sample size shows you need a larger sample size, then it may be rejected. And data analysis, you need to use latest techniques that are suitable for your study. For example, if you can use SEM, but you use regression analysis, it may be problematic. Or if it's, let's say it's about, you are using secondary data and it's about something in relationship with performance of the companies. If you are just collecting data for just 1 year, while you have the chance to, let's say, collect data for the past 30 years, this may be problematic. Or maybe if you don't use panel data and just use, the data for 1 year in secondary data analysis, again, so another part is data analysis. Then discussion. In the discussion, there are some common issues in papers that get rejected. One is using the statistics or technical terms in the discussion section. For example, p-value, beta, these should be discussed these should be stated in the results section. In the discussion, it's just a discussion. In the discussion, we just explain the findings by relating them to the past studies, theories, and literature. So avoid using the, those p-value, beta, or z-value, and so on in your discussion section. Another one, no citation. If there's no citation, this means you are not relating it to the past studies, and you may get rejection, right? So you should explain how your findings is related or add value to the past study, or you need to explain the findings using the past studies and theories. And no deep discussion. For example, you have 4 hypotheses in quantitative studies. Then you just mention the first hypothesis was supported, and this shows that there is a relationship between X and Y, and this is in line with the past studies, and then you cite. Then H2 is supported. This is in line with the past studies, and then you cite. No, you need to provide a deep explanation, right? So what does it mean? Okay, it's in line with past studies. So what does it mean? So you need to show the authors, you need to show the readers the whole picture. So what? You have so many hypotheses. What is the story behind this study, right? What does it show? And if some hypotheses are not supported, you need to explain why. Explain why you think the hypotheses are not supported. And sometimes you can provide very good justification, and this adds value to your paper. And there may be other issues as well. So you may address all of them, but at the end, the journal may have limited space for papers. For example, like my journal, we accept maybe less than 30 papers in a year, but we receive a few hundreds. So in this case, we accept the highest quality papers. Another one is the journal may have recently published a very similar paper. Usually the journals, at least those journals that I'm familiar with, they don't want 2 very similar papers in the journal, and they may reject your paper. And of course, there may be editor's publication bias. For my journals, for example, we don't check who are the authors of the paper. We check the paper itself. But yeah, I have talked to some editors, and they have mentioned this. For example, one of them told me that we received many papers from a specific country that I don't want to mention here, and almost all of them are really poor and not written well, at least not up to the standards that we expect. So we reject them. And then he told me that after 2-3 years, now when they receive papers from that country, the specific country, so their initial assumption is that the paper is not written well. So in this case, they may reject it easier, right? Hope the journal that you submit the journal that you target is bias free, but anyway, this is reality, and there may be, I don't know. And this was my personal experience of desk rejection. I shared with you the common reasons that papers get rejected after they submit before being sent for review. Hope you found it helpful, and hope you can improve your paper in the paper submissions in the future and pass desk rejection easily.